Welcome to Chapter 12, Food, Soil, and Pest Management. 12.1, what is food security and why is it difficult to obtain? I tried to put in my slide switcher thingy. Dang it, it always happens. Alright. Good. Next slide. Food security. All within an area receive enough nutrition to be healthy. And that's what we have in most developed countries, including the United States. Too much, in fact, and we'll get to that in a second. Food insecurity is the opposite. So basically you're not capable of being able to produce enough food, and it's for a variety of reasons. Poverty, which is just extreme poor conditions. There's not enough money. You don't have any of the resources that you need, so you're constantly living for the day. And to have food security, you need to have plans for the future. It takes advanced planning. And when you're just stricken with poverty, you don't have the luxury of planning for the future and trying to survive for today. It also deals with wars, areas that are war-torn. Civil wars go into parts of Africa where they've been, like Sudan's been in civil wars for the last 2 decades. And children there will often collect ants in their free time to get the extra nourishment that they need, which is crazy. Food insecurity, talking about India, they grow enough food or enough grain to feed their population. However, 1/5 go hungry anyway because it gets hoarded in certain groups, certain castes of people based on wealth and income. In Ireland, the potato blight of the 1840s, 25% of the population died or emigrated out of Ireland, yet their exports of beef, bacon, ham, and grain increased during that time period. Again, those who were incredibly poor, in poverty-stricken areas of Ireland, they have no clout, they have no weight, so they were kind of cast aside. And the rest of the food was sold off by the wealthier people who owned the farms and owned that land and owned the cattle and the bacon, and they sold it for profit. So is there enough food? There is enough food to feed everybody on the planet, but it's just not distributed equally. Right now there's about 7.3 billion people. We grow enough food for roughly 7.8. So it is a mathematical certainty that in a short period of time we will be at 7.8 billion people. And by that time we will then grow enough to feed roughly 8.3 billion people. And therefore our population will continue to increase until we cannot suck any more out of the earth, and then we'll have some type of population crash, perhaps. So let's see, so it's not distributed equally. If China imported just 20% of the grain it needed, right, to feed all 1.3 billion people, that 20% that China needs to import, right, this is roughly 50% of all grain exports by every other country in the world. So they need a massive quantity of grain, right, and the other countries can't export solely to them. The U.S. produces 17% of the world's grain using only 0.3% of the labor force, because we've moved out of that the person labor force, and we use mostly machines and equipment via the Green Revolution to get this job done. But not everybody on the planet, not all countries, have the luxury of that type of equipment, that type of money required to invest, so not everyone's producing that quantity of grain with such little labor. So again, of course, poverty impacts food security. The more poverty seen in an area, the less secure they are. In the United States of America, we only spend 2% of our income on food, and that's down from 10% roughly in the 1950s. And what the government started doing is it started subsidizing certain types of food, which was beneficial in the fact that it led to us now spending only a very small portion of our income on food. But as we'll see in a second, it's also led to this condition of overnourishment. In developing countries, the average is 40% of your income on food. It's almost half of your income spent on food. And in the really poor areas of the world, where we have lots and lots of poverty, 70% of their income is spent on food. So chronic hunger and malnutrition. Being undernourished. Someone who is undernourished, they do not consume enough calories. So if you need roughly 2,000 calories a day to survive, you'd be getting far below that, maybe 1,000 calories. So over time, your body is slowly starving itself. Long-term anorexia, except for the fact that you're not doing it to yourself, it's just the fact that you don't have any food. Malnourished, you consume enough calories, but not enough variety. You're not getting enough protein, you're not getting enough vitamins and minerals, so your body is deteriorating, breaking down, because you're just getting all of one thing, and predominantly it's carbohydrates. You know those commercials that you've seen on TV where it's like feed the starving children of the world, and they show those little babies, those little boys with the big swollen bellies? That is a syndrome called kwashiorkor, and it is, what's the language? Swahili, I believe, for displaced child. Because what happens is, roughly around the age of 4, when the mother stops breastfeeding them, that is the international age for how long a child is breastfed. I know it's much shorter than that in the United States. The breast milk gives you fat, gives you protein, gives you everything you need. They're switched from that into a purely grain diet. A lot of times it's rice that is dried, ground down into a powder, mixed with water, and a mixed paste. So that is all that they get, because the mother then has just had another baby, and that baby needs the milk. So the older one is displaced from the teat and given just this high carbohydrate diet, which induces the swelling of the belly because they lack the protein that they need. And then in developing countries, what is one thing we see whenever a country becomes developed or starts to become developed is this overnourishment, and people becoming overweight and becoming obese because we have access to too many calories, and we manufacture the food, process that into a certain way so that it becomes addictive. In nature, you rarely find fat and sugar together in any one thing. Right? They're usually separate. You find sugar, you eat it, you get what you need, you move on. You find fat, you eat it, you get what you need, and you move on. What they found in studies is that if you take sugar and you take fat and you combine them in processed foods, when you take them in, the effect that's seen in the brain in MRI scans is identical to the effect seen when somebody takes in cocaine, they snort cocaine. So it is actually addictive. And people who eat lots of processed foods that are high in fat and high in sugar get addicted to that food, and that's what we have in our developed countries. That's the situation. What happens when you don't get enough of these vitamins? It's different for each one. Iron, your body needs iron to carry oxygen. It forms a hemoglobin in your blood. It's what delivers the oxygen to all the cells. So if you're low in iron, you're anemic. You get very fatigued because the cells in your body are not getting all the oxygen they need to respond and be 100%. If you lack vitamin A, which we see in a lot of people in developing countries, then you go blind. It's associated with blindness. So they've done things. I think one of the case studies in this chapter is golden rice, which is a genetically modified rice grain, where they put in a gene from a daffodil and from a bacteria, and it actually makes beta carotene inside the rice grain so people can eat it and get some of the vitamin A that they need. And beta carotene is the stuff inside of a carrot and a sweet potato that makes it orange. And iodine. We have iodinized salt in most of your homes because you need iodine. It gets absorbed by your thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is what controls your metabolism. So if you don't get enough iodine in your system, which a lot of people in developing countries do not, then you get a swelling and engorging of the thyroid gland. It gets really, really big, and you get these big bulges on your neck that are like a football attached to your neck. They're huge. Famine is a severe shortage of food in an area accompanied by mass starvation, economic chaos, social disruption, and deaths. Mostly in poverty-stricken areas. Most victims of starvation are babies. Of course, it's terrible. 40,000 babies die every day of starvation, which is equivalent to 1 every 2.16 seconds. Let's go. We got 1,001, 1,002. There's a baby. 1,001, 1,002. There's a baby. 1,001, 1,002. There's a baby. Sad, isn't it? There's another baby. 1,001, 1,002. There's baby number 5. See what we're going with here? It's very, very sad. And that's the end of 12.1. I hope you enjoyed it.